It's Inside Cowboys training camp driven by Ford for one final time in training camp 2023 as we welcome you into the Globe Life Studios at the Star in Frisco. Alongside Nick Eatman, I'm Kyle Yeomans as we wrap up another season of Inside Cowboys training camp. We do so by answering some of the questions we had to start training camp before heading out to Oxnard, California. Nick, we start with the offensive line. It's a big talking point for this Cowboys team. Has this offensive line shown improvement enough? You've needed the young offensive linemen, the depth to step up. Have they helped ease the tension up front?
I don't think so. I really don't think that they've eased that tension. Now, I do think that the 1 through 5 on the offensive line, I mean, those guys are the ones that you're expecting to play the most. Not a lot of rotation there. And if they stay healthy, which is a big if, but if they can stay healthy, then yes, you're looking pretty good at that. But after that, there's still question marks, especially with injuries now to Matt Walesko. There's been an injury to Chuma Edoga earlier in camp. And so the other guys that have played a lot, even in Zach Martin's absence, I don't think that they're locks on the team. The one guy that's probably done it is the draft pick, Awesome Richards, but mainly because he's a draft pick and you expect him to be there. But I don't know if you can count on that many guys to say, oh, he'll come in right in and play.
And that's a huge question, I think, continuing. Do you go and trade for a veteran offensive lineman? Because up front, starting five-wise, you feel pretty good about what the Cowboys have. But in terms of the depth, I think it's a big question. Now, from the offensive side to the defensive side, Mazi Smith with plenty of action on Saturday against Seattle. How has he continued to grow? And Mike McCarthy saying at times he looks like a first-year player, but you got to find more of the times where he looks like a first-round player.
Right. And I think that's the kind of the growth that for any player, especially one that doesn't accumulate a lot of stats. And so that's the one thing that's kind of tricky there is that, sometimes they run the ball at him. He gets blocked. You can see that. It happened in the game the other night. There's other times where he's got two guys on him. He's eating up the double team. The running back bounces it to the outside, and another guy makes a play. But that's actually Mazi's play. And so that's what defensive tackles do. And so with some good, there's a lot of, there's some bad as well. It just mixes back and forth. And I think for the most part, he's been solid. But he'll get better. He's got good veterans around him.
Yeah, still a long way to go for both the offensive and defensive lines. The trenches, a big question mark going into training camp 2023. We'll answer some more questions when we come back. How about position battle updates? Running back, interior defensive line, and safety. How are things panning out now as training camp comes to a close?
Inside Cowboys Training Camp, presented by Ford, is brought to you by AT&T, official sponsor of the Dallas Cowboys. Sleep Number, the official sleep and wellness partner of the Dallas Cowboys. And by your Texas Ford dealers. Ford is the best in Texas. This segment is brought to you by Academy Sports and Outdoors, official sporting goods retailer of the Dallas Cowboys.
I feel like I was more comfortable as far as playing faster. Last week I feel like there were a couple of times, whether that be in pass protection or whether that be running the football, that I kind of wasn't playing as fast because I was thinking a little bit more. But another game under my belt, second game, I feel like I played a little bit faster today.
One player found the end zone in each of the first 2 weeks for the Cowboys in preseason action. That name, Deuce Vaughn, and he saw at least a little bit more action in that second preseason game, felt more comfortable along the way as well. As we welcome you back into Inside Cowboys Training Camp driven by Ford, we have Nick Harris on the show for the first time. And Nick, let's take a look at this running back position battle. Not only was Deuce Vaughn impressive in that game against Seattle, Rico Dowdle turned some head with his first touchdown as well.
Absolutely. Rico Dowdle has done some great things through the first two preseason games. Aside from that one fumble that he had against Jacksonville, things were looking really good for Rico as far as trying to accomplish that RB2 battle. It's still a very competitive room. You've got Rico Dowdle, Deuce Vaughn, Ronald Jones, who we haven't been able to see in the preseason, and Mike McCarthy said yesterday in his press conference that it's going to be a challenge to see him again this week on Saturday. So that running back room, it's coming down to Rico Dowdle, Deuce Vaughn, Malik Davis, and Hunter Lipke. Those guys are going to battle it out now.
What do you think about what Deuce has brought to the table and how it's really shifted things in that running back room?
Well, I mean, the season ended last year because you didn't have enough playmakers in San Francisco, and once Pollard got hurt, it was just CD, and I think that was a focal point moving forward this offseason, getting Brandon Cooks, getting guys that can make plays. Deuce is making plays. I mean, it doesn't matter if it's against second or third teamers. He's also have second and third teamers blocking for him as well. When he has an opportunity, he's making plays, and that's really all you can ask for.
Yeah, you're hoping that some of those plays can translate to the regular season as well, and you can kind of, because it's not your starting running back in Tony Pollard. You're talking about somebody that's going to have minimal snaps, so those playmaking ability, you're not going to have a huge sample size to really get that done. Speaking of sample size, though, Neville Gallimore's been up and down through the last couple of years, really has put together a nice camp, a good preseason as well. What do you think about the interior of that defensive line, Nick, and how they've really fluctuated and changed things up front?
Obviously very deep, because you've got draft picks that are playing in the second and third team with Bohanna and Gallimore, Chauncey Golston. Those are the backups, and they've all been drafted. That's why it's going to be kind of tough to see how this sorts out. I think he's done a nice job. He did a nice job last year, too, playing in the second and third preseason games. And so, you need to see him against the better competition, but he's a guy that eats up a lot of space, and that's one thing you do want from the defensive tackle.
Yeah, a challenge was put on this group during training camp whenever they drafted Mozzie Smith. Yeah. A challenge was put on them on the interior defensive line. Somebody show up, somebody take another step forward. I think Neville Gallimore's done a really good job of doing that. With guys like Osa Odighizuwa, now Mozzie in that room, Jonathan Hankins. That's a really competitive room, and I think he's done the most with that opportunity.
What do you think about the competitive room at safety and who's stepped up in that regard?
Absolutely. Whenever Donovan Wilson went down on the first day of training camp, it allowed a lot of these guys to get opportunities at safety. Marquise Bell has stepped in and done really well. Malik Hooker, I feel like, has had a really good camp as well. And Wanye Thomas had an interception on Trevor Lawrence. So it's definitely great when you love to see production from those guys. But as far as somebody taking that next step forward and really coming into a rotational role with the team, I think that's still up for grabs.
Yeah, especially when you think about DeMarvion Overshown getting injured. Now, I'm not saying he was a safety, but he kind of had those traits a little bit, especially on special teams, nickel and dime packages. So you wonder if a guy like Marquise Bell could maybe step into that role. It's not always have to be linebacker for linebacker, because that's what they loved about Overshown, and that's what they do love about him, is that he can be so versatile. Maybe you figure this out with a safety, maybe Mukwamu or a Marquise Bell, that can do things like that.
Yeah, definitely the versatility is the name of the game on defense, and you've already seen that with Dan Quinn these last 2 years. He's trying to build more versatility with some of those safeties on the back end this time as well. Thank you very much, Nick Harris, for joining us. When we come back, we wrap up Inside Cowboys training camp for 2023, but who's already earned their spot on the 53-man roster? We'll tell you who could take the pads off when we come back.
This segment was brought to you by Academy Sports and Outdoors, official sporting goods retailer of the Dallas Cowboys. Inside Cowboys Training Camp, presented by Ford, was brought to you by AT&T, official sponsor of the Dallas Cowboys. Sleep Number, the official sleep and wellness partner of the Dallas Cowboys. And by your Texas Ford dealers. Ford is the best in Texas.
It happens every single year. Some standouts in the preseason get an opportunity for a quick rest. Going into the final preseason game Saturday against Las Vegas, have there been any of these Cowboys that have earned that right?
Well, yeah, I think the easy answers there are Deuce Vaughn, Jalen Tolbert. Those guys right there for sure, I think, have done that. You also look at the situations of last week with the injuries. Look at the positions the guys went down. Overshown gets hurt, so maybe Damone Clark at linebacker, you don't want to mess with that. Also a tight end. I mean, you had an injury to John Stevens. Do you want Luke Schoonmaker to play? I mean, he needs the reps, but at the same time, if you get other injuries to that position, now you're creating even more of a problem with your depth. And so that's the balance, I think, that the coaches have to figure out here.
And it's certainly a conversation for Mike McCarthy and his staff to really engage in this week. What is the risk versus the reward? And I think going into that final preseason game, you're going to see a lot more Cowboys on the sideline without the pads on as they wrap up the preseason. And we wrap Inside Cowboys training camp for 2023. Special thanks to everybody who helped us out throughout the process. For Nick Eatman, I'm Kyle Yeomans. We'll see you in the regular season.